Welcome back. You're a monopoly. You get to face the entire market demand curve and get to pick the best price-quantity combination on that demand curve. You have a certain set of costs. What's the best point to pick on the demand curve? That's the subject of this session. And it'll turn out it's the same marginal revenue, marginal cost rule that we developed in looking at firms in perfectly competitive settings. The same basic rule applies. You want to keep expanding output so long as marginal revenue exceeds marginal cost, out to the point where the two are equal. And should you reach a point where marginal revenue starts to fall below marginal cost, you've expanded output too much, you've chosen too low a price. Table 11.2 shows why. Now in this setting, as we'll see, we're in a long-run setting. Total costs at an output of 0 are equal to 0, so no fixed costs. That's how we know we're in a long-run setting. Price and quantity of the first two columns depict a downward sloping demand curve that you face. Total revenue is just the multiplication of the first two columns. So at a quantity of 0, total revenue is 0. Profit is the difference between total revenue and total cost. Columns 6 and 7 depict the average revenue and average total cost curves. Columns 8 and 9 look at marginal revenue and marginal cost. Now note that marginal revenue is only equal to price or average revenue at the very first unit. But beyond that, marginal revenue falls below average revenue. It's got to be dragging down average revenue or price as we move down the demand curve. And look what happens. So long as marginal revenue exceeds marginal cost, profit keeps going up. So if we look at the profit column, it keeps rising all the way until we get to an output level of 7. And profit is maximized at 12.21, roughly where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Should we go beyond that point where marginal revenue falls below marginal cost, then profit's falling. It goes below 12.21 down to as low as $8 at a quantity and output level of 10. Now what does this mean graphically? Figure 11.2 shows, and this is very similar, except here total revenue isn't a straight line, but it's an upside down bowl. Perfect competition, total revenue rises at a flat rate. Marginal revenue or price is constant. The firm's a price taker. Where you're a price setter or price chooser, total revenue with a downward sloping demand has a upside down bowl shape to it. And what you want to do is you want to expand output, and these numbers correspond to the previous table, out to an output level of 7. That's where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And that output level, if you shoot it up to the demand curve, indicates the price you ought to be charging, $8.80. That's where profit is maximized. Now, if we look at the total curves, it's the same intuition we developed last week in the context of perfect competition. So long as the difference between total revenue and total cost, the height difference is expanding. So long as the slope out here, marginal revenue of the slope of total revenue is greater than the slope of the total cost curve, you're adding on to profits. Profits are maximized. The height between those difference between those two curves is maximized, distance AB, when the slopes are just equal. When the slope of total revenue or marginal revenue equals the slope of total cost or marginal cost. And after that point, the height difference starts constricting because marginal cost, slope of total cost, starts being greater than slope of total revenue or marginal revenue. The marginal curves tell us what output level to produce, what price to charge. How do we figure out profit? Just like in the competitive setting, we use the average curves. So once we've determined the right output level, 7, let's compare the difference between the average revenue curve. Demand is the same as average revenue or price, and average cost. Let's take the average profit margin multiplied by quantity, we get the blue rectangle. That blue rectangle is total profit, or pie. So we use the marginal curves to figure out the right output. We use the average curves to figure out the average profit margin, and then ultimately the profit and how we can depict it graphically. Same rules we applied in perfect competition, except we just have the firm facing a different demand curve. Perfect competition, price taking, flat demand curve. Here, you face the entire demand curve. You pick the right price-quantity combination. We'll turn to some applications and insights, further insights about monopoly in the next session.